Interest in autonomy has always been a grand thing. A lot of people, but at what point does it become, will it impair like the autonomy of other people? Let's say you were to come into a sum of money sufficient enough to fund one of your aspirations. That being, maybe you want to build like a dream house. Now, as you lay out the blueprint for this house, a friend of yours who is an engineer reviews it and notes that it is unstable and it's generally not going to work out. But you decide to overlook his insight on the matter and decide that your knowledge is greater than his, and you proceed to erect the building anyway. Soon after, which is expected, the building collapses and fatality ensues. But who could we really put at fault here? Would it be the community for not imposing regulations onto having a review to assure that it's stable prior to the building of it? Could it be the engineer at fault for not doing a better job convincing the individual not to do it? Or the individual himself who just decided to do it anyway because he believed he was capable? Well, we encounter a similar situation when we talk about individuals that decide to forego vaccination. And I'm sure we've all had first-hand experience with this, or living in the States at the moment. You may or may not be aware that measles, mumps, and polio, conditions that should have been previously eradicated, are actually like at an all-time high due to the anti-vaccination movement. And so I'll cover what we may need to do, some of the illogical holdups on that matter, as well as potential means of action. As far as like imposing the laws to regulate that, it could be in accordance with the CDC. They already have protocols or suggestions of vaccinations that people receive depending on like current outbreaks and all the other epidemiological matters they study. They could also, or just still provide the patient slight autonomy with regards to some other matters like how detrimental it will be to the general welfare. But you could also attempt to educate the individuals that are anti-vaccination at the moment, but that has proven difficult due to their abstinence at the moment to some different matters. But you could also just try to employ that educational matter like more in the adolescence where they can synthesize some independent ideals of their own from the information they receive. But say this were to fail, what might happen? Well, you need to look no farther than California. Recently they had an outbreak of pertussis, also known as whooping cough, and some people believe that instead of just receiving vaccination, they can just wait until they get sick and go to the hospital, which in some cases is alright, but with pertussis it's sort of a funny case, because the way it progresses is it'll just seem like a normal illness for the first couple weeks until the bacteria reaches its maximum size and begins to die is when the actual symptoms that are problematic start, which last like 4 to 8 weeks. So all you can really do is implement some chemotherapeutic agents to remove or make allow for ease of removal of the mucus that's basically making them drown. But as you have all likely experienced a disease state being like an infection that has an adverse response on the host, you may understand its undesirability and not want to impose that on another individual. But there's still some opposition. A lot of the opposition comes from people that are pretending not to be at fault. They'll claim that since their children aren't vaccinated, like people that are vaccinated shouldn't be afraid if they really believe that vaccinations are, I don't know, they work well. But that's sort of a faulty argument because, well, first we gotta kind of discuss like how immunology works. You have, well, just innate defense. You have two bare lines. You have a non-specific chemical response, and then you have your skin, which secretes sebum, which imparts you with like more pliability of your skin so it doesn't break, and it also lowers the pH. In addition to that, there's sweat, which confers like, what is it? It's a high salinity material, so it creates a hypertonic condition. Like basically, it's gonna suck all the water out of stuff. Stuff's gonna shrivel up. and lysozymes on that, and microbial antagonism from the staphylococcus present on the skin. So that should take care of like your skin, but they can also enter like through like inhalation, but you can kind of like combat that with like the mucus membrane lining your intestinal tract and everything else, and the cilia will kind of brush that away. Or it could enter parenteral, which is basically you step on a nail, which I'll kind of like discuss later with tetanus. But if it were to get past that line of defense, you have to be dependent on adaptive immunity. Basically, adaptive immunity is when you have a previous encounter with an antigen, which is a determining factor for like a disease. You're going to build up within like 10 to 20 days a response to it, and then you can attack it. So you're kind of going to be like in a poor state for the first 10 to 20 days, unless you have previously received your vaccination, so you have like a garrison of antibodies to go against that, which allows for the problem with people that don't vaccinate, because since they don't have that garrison opposing like the disease when it enters them, because there'll be a heightened level of multiplication because of the bacterium, and bacteria in heightened amounts can overcome a person that has received the vaccination, because it only works to a certain point. It can overcome like your defense. So you have like 100 opposing factors, but like 1,000 bacteria enter, like it's gonna overwhelm that. And in addition to that, since their body's not fighting it off for the first 10 to 20 days, with that intense multiplication, that allows for mutation to occur, which renders the vaccinations of the people that were vaccinated pretty much useless, and because it's a different strain of the organism. But also, some people stress the importance of natural immunity. Say you want to encounter something and build up your own defense. Well, this may work like if you're talking about like herpes, which all of you have, or chickenpox. It's a strain of herpes. Anyway, but you still want to receive a vaccination for that, because if you don't, it'll hit you in a higher dose, like it's going to hit you harder. The magnitude's going to be greater. And also there's a greater occurrence for like reemergence of shingles later on, because after you have your symptoms subside, it's still in your body. It recedes back to the neural tissue of your spine, and that's why when it reemerges as shingles, it's in patches. But so they were to look at like another thing where survival isn't always like guaranteed, or like severe impairment would follow, which I will talk about Clostridium difficile, or Clostridium tetani, sorry. Clostridium tetani, basically, it's a bacteria you always find it like in like a cow's intestines most commonly. Like you used to hear it like in step on a rusty nail, which you can get it from a normal nail. It was just commonly associated with rusty nails because like pastures and farms in America, and cows would defecate on like different nails, which were 100% iron back then, and it would just like enter the body when you stepped on the nail. So you can get it from a normal nail or anything. But what's going to happen with this is it blocks an inhibitory chemical signal, which allows you to release the contraction of the muscle. So if you bend your arm, you're unable to release the bending. So you can see with the spine, it's contorted, wrist as well, the neck, immobility. So that individual did not have the vaccination, and the binding of the chemical to that, the other piece, is difficult to break without causing damage to the individual. So even if he were to survive, they would have severe complications following in their life. And usually that'll just like result in fatality, because antagonistic muscles will be contracting, and like your bones will break under the force, or you'll take your last breath and you're unable to go above the air. Also, some people say that there's aluminum present in vaccines. This is true. There's also aluminum present in breast milk. So, formaldehyde is pears. Also, if you're, it's used in the processing of the vaccinations. Its quantity is not the same at the end. They dilute it before like giving it as an administration to levels that are lower than what is present in your body, because your body also naturally produces formaldehyde. So, also, like a lot of people will say that hospitals or like, pharmaceutical companies are just looking to make money, but so maybe they want to make money by selling their vaccines, but you're going to be saving money because I don't know. I think it's like cheaper to get a vaccination than maybe like go have like surgery, hospitalization, a recovery period, complications that don't permit you to follow through with your job, all that jazz. Also, another big one was like autism. I'm not sure why that's still debated because the paper was retracted that, and the guy has been stripped of his title that submitted it. Basically, there was some other stuff associated with it, like there was some underground stuff, like some lawyers that made him. It was like pseudoscience or whatever, and yeah. So also, so now that we sort of went over like some of the foibles of their debate, I guess you could say, like we can go back to some of the needs we could possibly try. So what you guys could do if you want to is you could try to do the educational factor to like your peers if you want, like if you want to like consult me through D2L, like my contact information's there. If you want me to like review like how scientifically sound the premises are you want to use to like go against like something, if you want to try to convince them to be more healthier and do that. Or like also I'm leading a rather despairing endeavor on Facebook right now, opposing some of the major groups that are against vaccinations. You can rally behind me on that if you're interested. Or I heard that like you could like rally locally. I've heard that's been successful. But after that, though there are like, you want to understand like the plural of anecdote is not necessarily data, so it's easy for people to be misled online, and being that like dilute like oh yeah, those that share a belief often do not see that belief as a delusion. So sometimes you have to just use overwhelming logic if you want to be convincing.